Boom. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed. Got a fantastic panel as usual. So let's go ahead and start because we do have a lot of fun things to talk about. So we're going to introduce a young man who I've grown to be quite fond of over the last couple of events that we got to kick it. He is the main man at Bloody Elbow. He is the babyface assassin now that Josh Barnett has grown a beard. He is Nick Baldwin. Nick, what's going on with you, man?
I'm doing good, Ant. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me on, and it's good to talk to you guys again. Jay, first time, and Ben, second time, so good to be here.
Rock and roll.
All right. So, of course, we have the senior editor of SureDog.com, the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what is up, my man?
Oh, this past weekend was an absolute buffet of mixed martial arts. It offered us some impressive highlights and some definitely humorous lowlights, and I cannot wait to dig into them with you guys.
All right. And to anchor the panel, as usual, although I can't really say as usual because he was been a little absent. Of course, he got a little sick last week, but he's back healthy and here to dish all the math, all the statistics, all the facts and figures. The homeboy, Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on with you?
Last week, I missed you guys, and I'm looking forward to this. So, to piggyback off what Ben said about the buffet of fights, here's the stat of the week. 35. 35 is the number of fights that Bellator threw at us in Bellator 217 and 218 in a doubleheader, which is the most of any weekend doubleheader by far. There has not even been anywhere close to as many fights in one weekend that Bellator gave us. The next total was 26. So they gave us everything they could with all these fights with 35 Bellator fights. I'm sure you watched every single minute.
Out of the 35 fights, only 6 of them were easily ready to watch on some sort of streaming platform. So now let's go ahead and jump right into all the shenanigans. So we're going to start off with the UFC event that took place in Copenhagen. That was Saturday morning for us in the United States. I love to have breakfast with my martial arts. So second round knockout over Jack Hermansson, Jared Cannonier. It looked very impressive now. How far do you guys think he can make it in the middleweight division?
I'll take a cut at this one. I think he can make it to a title shot. I had Hermansson big going into this one. There's no underestimating what a danger Cannonier is. I mean, he hits like a truck. But I figured Hermansson had this one. I figured he'd, avoid danger on the feet, take him down, squash him, and either pound him out, tire him out, or choke him out. I was wrong. I think the way middleweight looks right now, Cannonier is one more win and a little bit of fortuitous timing from being at a title shot, and I think he's going to get one. Maybe not immediately, he might win one, lose one, win one, but he'll get a title shot within the next 18 months or so.
I was very, very impressed by what Jared Cannonier did, but I was one of the few people, at least out of the SureDog staff. I think it was myself, it was Jason Burgos, I think Tyler. Maybe one other person, and I can't remember. I hope it isn't Cole, just because I want to hate on Cole for no good reason. But that picked Jared Cannonier to win this. So my thinking behind this was that, while Hermansson has had some very impressive performances as of late, I thought Jared Cannonier was the guy that was being slept on. To see what he did against David Branch in particular, not so much the Anderson Silva fight because, Anderson Silva is kind of not what he used to be. And granted, David Branch is, and David Branch is on the downslide. I mean, effectively his career is over now with the new suspension. But just the way he beat Branch seemed very impressive to me, to kind of have a touch of adversity and then to suddenly dial into everything he needed to do and get the job done and outbox a guy whose boxing in MMA is quite underrated. So that kind of swayed it for me, even though Hermansson finished Branch faster. That was the deciding factor to me. So Nick, man, tell me what was your assessment before this fight and what is it after?
I picked Hermansson. I think he was favored. He should have been. He was supposed to be. I just figured it on the feet. He was a longer guy. I thought he'd be able to pick him apart if he so choose. And if he wanted to take it to the ground, I think he could have done that as well. I think that's what most people were thinking, and everyone picking Hermansson. But I did think, hey, Cannonier hits like a truck, especially at middleweight. So if he cracks Hermansson a couple times, that might be all it takes, and that proved to be right. Even though my actual prediction was not right. I think Cannonier can go far. I don't know if he'll be the middleweight champion. I just look at the guys like Whitaker and Israel Adesanya, and there is a space there. It goes Whitaker, Adesanya, maybe Romero, and Costa too, of course, and then everyone else. Cannonier's not there. I don't know if he ever will be, but Hermansson did just beat Jacare, and not to do MMA math, but it's a big win. There's nothing. Not trying to take away from the win over Hermansson. It's great. I don't think Cannonier would be the champ, but he's one away from a title shot, so he could get there, as Ben said.
Question for Nick. 3 months from now, Cannonier versus Gastelum. Who you got?
Gastelum.
Me too, and I think we'd both be wrong.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's a really close fight. So,
yeah, I think when we mentioned Jared Cannonier, it's like we got to realize that he gives a lot of people problems at middleweight. He gives pretty much everybody some sort of problems. Now, Jay, tell me if I'm on an island on this one. I think the most dangerous thing about Cannonier are the adjustments he makes in the fight. As it's going on, he just seems to get better. Now, we saw how his that initial takedown defense looked like it wasn't the greatest, and then next thing you know, he's just throwing them off. And it seems to be this progressive, almost like an avalanche effect of Cannonier just being in the cage with you long enough. So tell me, am I on an island with this one?
Well, it's really interesting how that first round played out, writing it up. Hermansson came out like his hair was on fire. He was going crazy. He was throwing those big leg kicks, and he was pressuring him, and he suplexed him. What's going on here? And so he blitzed him and surprised Cannonier. He absolutely surprised him and caught him off guard and thought, whoa, he's throwing everything at me immediately. But like you said, he figured it out. And how did he figure it out? He figured it out with those leg kicks. Those leg kicks were his best tool by leaps and bounds. He shocked me. 3 or 4. That's all I needed to change the course of the fight. It wasn't just a battering him, working him on for a while until he gets there. No, we saw at the end of the first round, Hermansson kind of picking his leg up, and he even got kind of his leg kicked off from underneath him after like 5 or 6. It wasn't many. And then they opened the second round with some, caught him with that uppercut, and was all over. Yeah, man, Cannonier, he surprised me too. I expected that he has the power advantage. I mean, he's a former heavyweight. That he dropping down, he'd have the power. He'd catch him early. This is what I wrote in my prime picks, as I had Hermansson outlasting that storm. He didn't outlast that storm. It didn't happen. Could Cannonier? This was a kind of a fight I was floating around, if not Gastelum Till afterwards. And the UFC, for some reason, doesn't want to give Costa a title shot. They should, but if they don't, Cannonier versus Costa would be a mess. Holy smokes. That would be crazy power punches until somebody falls down. It'd be a heavyweight fight in middleweight form. So, can he win a belt? I don't see it, but I didn't see him beating Hermansson. So what the heck do I know? I'm just a guy in a Hawaiian shirt.
I mean, that's one thing that's really, really cool to consider about Cannonier is that he gets better. Like every time he's dropped weight, he's just looked better. Now, this is not a cry for him to go to welterweight. So before someone decides to murder me in the comments, that's not what I'm saying.
Cannonier's the GOAT.
Yeah, we're not trying to see him challenge DJ or anything, but I do like the fact that every time we see him with this improved body, that he's faster, he's retained this power, and from a technical standpoint, he is able to just pick up things as the action is flowing. That is a very, very dangerous man. That is a very scary man. That is someone that I can see some of the guys who have a little more to lose avoiding in the future. And he did say in this post-fight speech that that he had trouble getting a fight.
He said a lot of things in his post-fight speech.
He said, and the thing about his post-fight speech, he didn't need to do any of that. I already liked the guy enough. When he walked into the arena with the Black Power Afro pick, I was sold, man. I was sold. That was the pick.
He walks in to Houston Hip Hop Classic Man by Big Mo.
Yeah, Big Mo.
He
right
wins,
off the bat.
He wins the biggest fight of his career in pretty impressive fashion. And then he says, I have a chunk of iron pyrite that allows me to control the universe with the power of my mind. No fighter has been more in the zone than this since Justin Gaethje knocked out James Vick, ran up the cage, and did a backflip off it and stuck the landing all in 5 seconds of real time. That is how in the zone the man was.
Yeah, like the only thing that could have made that better is if he dropped a random vibranium reference. That is the only thing that would have made that better. Jared Cannonier is an American hero. I salute you, sir. All right, so let's go on further down what happened in Copenhagen. So swing or miss. I'll start with you, Nick. The Von Flue choke. Is it about time to rename it to the Von Preux choke?
Yeah, that's a swing. I mean, Jason, what's his name? Jason Von Flue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like he has 2 of them. OSP has 4. So that's double the Von Preux chokes. I mean, it should have already been the Von Preux choke. So yeah, better late than never. But it's the Von Preux.
I don't see how you can disagree. Jay, Ben, are we in agreement here? Von Preux?
We're in agreement. I mean, it's silliness anyway. So why not go sillier? But yeah, it got its name from Jason Von Flue. Pulling it off on anyone? Alex Karalexis.
Karalexis?
Did it? Yes, at UFC Fight Night 3 or Ultimate Fight Night 3, it was called at the time. Very memorable event. That's the one where Dwayne Ludwig knocked out Jonathan Goulet in between 4 and 11 seconds, depending on how you count. That is where hat tip to Jay. Tim Sylvia shit his pants.
I say he's a maniac, baby.
I mean, the Von Flue choke was not even the most memorable thing that happened on that card. It was just a weird thing that happened. And on the back of that, it's been called this for 12 or 13 years. One marginally UFC level fighter pulling it off on another marginally UFC level fighter in a low stakes fight. Meanwhile, Ovince Saint Preux is out here doing it to UFC level fighters, including some borderline top 15 people. And more tellingly, he's developing setups for it that don't require his opponent to do a white belt mistake. Like he actually has setups for this low percentage choke. He's weaponized the thing. Rename it.
I was just imagining the whole time. Our former colleague and Nick, your current colleague Jordan Breen, just losing his mind every time a Von Preux choke was landed. I just remember co-hosting his show, and he would lose his shit. It would just be a complete meltdown. So I just wish I got to see a meltdown from him on Twitter for this one. But
he can't even have the meltdown anymore, because it's not anymore that you held onto the guillotine when he stepped over into side control because you were terrified of him beating the shit out of you. I mean, on this one, he dove down into the guy's guard and slapped a Von Preux choke on him. He has weaponized it.
It was really a sight to behold. I had to stop. I was writing the play-by-play up, and I saw him setting it up, and I just went, no.
Did you see him reach up and grab his hand?
No way. I could not believe that he basically forced him to go for a he forced him to go for a guillotine off his back so he could set up this. Are you kidding me? That's not supposed to happen. That's like Paul Harris kind of doing something else to set up his horrible heel hook kind of situation. It's a dangerous thing. It's a brilliant move that it's getting to the point that you're not going to be able to scout that. I mean, he's hit 4 of them. Oh, I have to use my hands to point out he's hit 4 of these chokes. There have been 6 in UFC history, and he's hit 4. Are you kidding me? Yes. Von Preux or bust.
Yeah, that's the only way to go. But I got another topic on. I guess we might as well keep it in the swing or miss category here about OSP. Great win over the weekend, and he's had some signature wins. He's gotten kind of far in his career, even once challenged for an interim light heavyweight belt. But is he the biggest waste of athletic talent in MMA history?
No. There has to be someone more of a waste. I'm just trying to.
Pico?
I don't
too
think
early for Pico.
Too early.
Yeah,
You can't,
yeah, that's a good point.
I'm borderline thinking that it might be OSP. Like he might be the biggest what if in MMA history, simply based on his athleticism. Like because we've talked about this. I think last week we mentioned this, and I know every time OSP comes up, this topic arises. He's 36 years old, a veteran of nearly 40 fights, but it still feels like he's a prospect at times. And I think that's because in Strikeforce, when he was throwing his front kick to jab combinations that are just totally illogical, and it worked because he was just a big athlete. He was a big, strong guy and fast. He's still doing that like 10 years later, so it's like he never got out of the prospect phase. I just wonder what he would have been able to do had he left his long time coaching in Knoxville, Tennessee. He went to an ATT, or he went to Farasa Hobby. He went to some serious MMA coaches that have full camps of talent around them, and what it would look like if he were built up as a guy who didn't have to rely on that marvelous athleticism to get by.
The only other guy that comes to mind of wasted potential, quote unquote, is Uriah Hall, because he can knock out and beat anybody in the world, and then lose a split decision to anybody else, to Gerald Harris. It's just he has everything that could be there. I mean, he knocked out Gegard Mousasi with, what was it, a spinning back kick to flying knee to spinning reverse hook kick. Just the point. He did that combination that knocked out Mousasi. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an accident. It was something he set up to do it. And then he fought him again and got just totally ground and pounded in his face off.
And he got outstruck by Derek Brunson. Where it's just like these total illogical patterns, and so Uriah Hall would definitely be a guy on that list as well. So any other nominations for this dubious award before we move on, fellas?
The what could have beens.
Yeah.
Or if Duffy takes this and makes a series out of it, the what could have beens.
Uriah Hall is a good one though, just because unlike OSP, there's been fights where he's done everything right and he looks like a world champion, and then he craps the bed. But OSP, we haven't seen that from him. I think Hall is more of a quote unquote wasted talent, just because, as Jay said, he has everything. He just can't put it all together at all times. OSP, I don't know if that's the case. Yeah, he's athletic, but I mean, John Jones basically described him as he's so green still that he is unpredictable, and that's why he wins fights in certain situations, and why, I mean, that their fight in 2016 was actually kind of, OSP hung in there. But OSP, I've never seen a champion, a world champion in his fights personally.
Well, Nick, let me alert you to something here. I'm a very sensitive man, and I don't like being upstaged on my own damn channel. So
sorry.
Stop saying things that are smarter than what I said.
I will shut up for the rest of the time.
Unacceptable. All right. So before you shut up for the rest of the time, I need you to answer a few questions that we have left to discuss. Okay. So I'm going to kick it to you first off, just because you said you didn't want to say anything else for the rest of the show. MVP. Won by knockout at Bellator 227 / Bellator Dublin / Bellator The Lost Card, but not without some level of controversy because there was a point deducted due to taunting between him and his opponent Keeley, and Dan Miragliotta had some rather unflattering words to share as a result. So Nick, tell me what's your take on this entire situation?
Well, I didn't see the fight because I didn't want to try and find out how to watch the fight. So it's tough to comment on a referee mishap situation when you didn't actually see it yourself. But just based on what people said, it seems like, I mean, it's a bizarre situation. It seems like there's no consistency. Because didn't Keeley give MVP the middle finger and Miragliotta did nothing about it, and then he took a point away from...
He took the point away from MVP after the... So, the sequence went like this, and this was rather bizarre to me, but I guess at some point he told them that he wanted sportsmanlike conduct the whole time. The fight starts, and they're saying stuff back and forth to each other, MVP says something that prompts Keely to give him the finger.
Yep.
Dan Miragliotta steps in, scolds them both, but seems to scold Page a little harder. Then when they start fighting again, MVP gets him on the ground, and he's ground and pounding, and in between punches, he decided to like wave his hand or do like a gun gesture.
He was pretending that he was taking a selfie.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, I just saw his fingers. I didn't know if it was like a like a London gang thing or something. I didn't know what he was doing, but yeah. So he starts doing this little hand gesture, and this in between punches, Miragliotta stops the action, stands him up, deducts a point. They reset, and then MVP annihilates homeboy right after that. Yeah.
Like it's interesting because I have no problem if a ref wants to take away a point for unsportsmanlike conduct. I get it. I'm okay with that because they do say, I mean, fight clean, be sportsmanlike. It is. I mean, it's prize fighting, but it is a sport, believe it or not, at sometimes, anyways. And so I get it. If a ref wants to do that, fine. But I mean, if you're gonna do that, you have to scold both of them equally. You can't say, slap Keely's wrist and then take a point that could affect the results of the fight from MVP. So I guess take a point from both or just don't do anything like most refs would do. So my biggest issue is it wasn't consistent. I probably would be on the side of just don't take any points. It's MMA. These guys don't like each other, whatever. It'll be over soon, Dan. But if you're going to take a point, make it equal.
I disagree with that take, but it's a different, interesting, intelligent way to do it. And
so I can keep talking because you're about to say something smarter than me. Okay.
No, I'm gonna give Ben and Jay a chance to say something smarter than me, and I will just give you dirty looks through the camera.
I'll jump in on this one. I thought it was horrible, and of all the fights on the lost card, I did seek this one out after the fact because of all the chatter about it. Yeah, I thought it was a horrible move on Miragliotta's part. Now, whether I think it's distasteful for Page to showboat in the cage and whether I think it's extra dumb for him to do so in a bounce-back fight against a 3-1 fighter, considering that he is fresh off of showing the world his competitive ceiling in his last two fights. Because that's really what he did in the fights against Daly and then Lima. He showed us his ceiling. And to come back from that, take a fight against a 3-1 fighter, and the 3-1 fighter is saying in the lead up to the fight, I can't believe you're fighting me. This is bullshit. I loved the self-awareness on Keely's part. So whether I think all that is distasteful is irrelevant. That is not Miragliotta's job. His job, first and foremost, is to protect the fighters. Even the stuff that's one step removed from that, like standing people up from the ground that refs do, I think is secondary and discretionary. His job number one is to enforce the rules, and the rules are there to protect the fighter's safety. Now, having said that, Dan Miragliotta is all of us. I would have wanted to deduct a point too. I would have wanted to disqualify his ass and send him home. And poor Dan, back in July, I was there when he was reffing Hardy versus Adams. And he had another moment like this because, after giving Adams like 3 lifetimes to get up from having his head boxed in, that I'm sure was due at least in part to him not wanting Hardy to win, probably. As he's raising Hardy's hand, Hardy is partying down and like mugging for the crowd, and you can see Dan just kind of like throws his, lets go of his hand and walks off and just like, fuck this. Like, I don't know if any of you were aware of that or saw. It made a little bit of a splash.
He went like this afterwards.
Yeah. Like, Dan Miragliotta in 2019 is done with the bullshit. he is all of us. He's like me, like 8 inches taller and more tan.
But the difference in that though is that that what he did in the Dan Hardy, Greg Hardy fight. Sorry, he'll be
reffing Dan Hardy next year.
Yeah, he probably will. Yeah. But in the Greg Hardy fight, it didn't affect the fight itself.
No, it didn't affect the fight, but you can see that his emotions are coming to the surface.
See, I do understand. Like, we're all human. We're all going to have emotions and express them and whatnot. But when you become an official and you are in a position of objectivity, you forfeit the right to express those emotions, at least in that moment.
What we expect from our referees is for them to make terrible calls and for us not to understand why. We want the Mazagatis, where the Yamasakis, where they did something terrible and we don't know why. With Miragliotta, he does something terrible and we do know why, and I don't want that peek behind the curtain.
So, yeah, Jay, I know you've got some thoughts on this one. I can see it brewing.
I watched this whole thing. I watched this entire mess live because I like to make sure when I write about these cards for my Fight Facts columns, I've seen the fight that I can talk about. So, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with Miragliotta doing it and it's not just because the commission, the commission overseeing it. So Mike Mazzulli, Connecticut, oversaw the Ireland Commission, whatever you want to call it. The jurisdiction fight was done by Mazzulli. Anyway, they said we're okay with it. I'm good with Miragliotta. If he had not taken a point, I would have supported it. But he took a point, so I support it. It was a very interesting answer. Unsportsmanlike conduct.
I did not know that Mazzulli was overseeing this. Did they call it the Ohegan Tribal Commission over there?
Yes,
that's their go-to commission when they go overseas.
Anywhere international that doesn't have a commission overseeing it, Israel and so on and so forth. Mazzulli's there.
The McKeegan Tribal Commission. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that unsportsmanlike conduct was about doing something that could harm your opponent. Like say backflipping while your opponent's unconscious, flipping off of their back. That's unsportsmanlike conduct because he's already unconscious and you're flipping off him. There's no rule for taunting. I looked all over the place, but there is a rule for abusive language. You can't curse at each other in the cage. That is a clear foul in the unified rules. Now, I've seen interviews to say, I'm not really going to mess with it. Stop yelling. This is being a mess. The way MVP carries himself can strike people differently. And you can say, he's a showboater, he's the worst, or man, he's making it fun. But the thing that did bother me was specifically the thing that he lost the point about, that I'm okay with. Because he's on the ground on top of this guy, pounding away on him, about to get the finish. Miragliotta's looking real close. The fight's going to be over shortly. And he proceeds to stop punching him while this guy's trying to defend himself and protect himself, and pretends to go, and take a selfie. Okay, seriously? No, come on. This is cage fighting. There's blood, there's violence, insanity. But come on. Get out of here with that nonsense. Just finish the fight. Just shut up and finish this. Dance around, throw a pokeball, hop around and do what you want in your post-fight interview. He's done all these things. And do that afterwards. Fight's the fight. Have it in this one window. Follow these things. Don't be terrible. And then afterwards and before, go ahead. Have fun. But you're trying to make your other opponent, your opponent bleed and fall down and go to sleep. Come on.
But at the end of the day, that only harms Page to stop the offense to taunt. Like, look at what happened with Ian McCall in the first Demetrius Johnson fight. Yeah. Like, that moment seriously could have changed everything that we know about the flyweight division. Had McCall just kept hitting DJ,
instead of
maybe the fight would have and sitting up and screaming toward the crowd. Perhaps he would have gotten the finish. He would have been he could have, won the tournament, become the champion. A member of the Hall of Fucking Awesome as well, Ian McCall. So he could have, his career would have been totally different had that night been, that moment had been changed. Page was setting himself up for that moment as well. It would have been only his fault, and it would have been only to his detriment if that pause in the action, which was very brief, was enough time for Keeler to scoot his hips out. Next thing you know, he gets up and he head kicks him to hell.
Sure.
So what good is taking the point going to do? Now here's one for you guys that is definitely off script, and just kind of occurred to me. Now I kind of think I know what direction you're going to lean into, and maybe I guess I'm standing on an island with this one, meaning that you gentlemen are wrong. But who had the worst performance by an official over the weekend? Was it Dan Miragliotta, or was it Reben Saber, who was the referee for the Nicholas Dalby and Cowboy Oliveira fight?
Saber by armbar. No question in my mind. There were several moments in the Dalby Oliveira fight that, again, running play by play, I had to try and professionally and calmly explain that this is nonsense, that this is hogwash. That, are you serious? He's in half guard, raining down punches and elbows, and Reben Saber stands the fight up. Or Reben Saber calls the illegal up kick and then admonishes them and then takes the position away, and then everything's all confused again. Several moments that he changed the course of that fight. I think that Reben Saber, who, as it turns out, hasn't reffed many UFC fights, maybe needs, I don't know, some more regional level fights to ref to get more experience under his belt. Just wasn't his night.
All right. What about you, gentlemen? Are you in agreement with that assessment?
Easily.
I mean, I didn't see other fights, but Jay seemed pretty convincing, so I'll side with him.
I'll take it.
No, like Saber was easily worse. Like
he was the less competent, but I feel, especially in light of what MVP said after the Dublin card, where he said that he had some previous encounters with Miragliotta that weren't friendly, and he felt disrespected in some of those instances. I've sensed a lot of personal bias if we're to believe MVP. So now the question is it worse for a referee to be incompetent or to have a personal grudge going into it?
Yes.
That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's
because we saw that as we mentioned already with the Greg Hardy fight, like shaking his head. Clearly, I mean, like a lot of people, like I don't blame Dan, but as a referee, even if you're refereeing Greg Hardy, you have to be, in the middle. Yeah, you can't be biased against him and do something against his favor. So yeah, no, you're right, Ant. I mean, I think the ref of the Dalby Oliveira fight screwed up more than Miragliotta, but it's bias versus you're just a bad referee. What's worse? I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd rather have a biased referee than an incompetent one. If there's a ref and the fighter knows that they have a personal animus, he can just say, I don't want him to be my ref. And they can assign him somewhere else where he'll do a good job. An incompetent ref is an incompetent ref no matter who they're reffing.
All right. Well,
yeah, wasn't it Lesnar Mazzagatti? I think that he said, I don't want him to ref my fights.
Lesnar didn't want Mazzagatti because of the first Mir fight.
Because of the Mir fight, exactly.
Yeah, the first Mir fight.
Yeah,
second Mir fight went just great. He pulled out that golden horseshoe and
beat him over the head.
Gave him a bowl full of strawberries.
Sad day for me.
Yeah, and also, if I'm not mistaken, like everybody at Serra Longo wants nothing to do with Doug Crosby being a judge.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember that.
He's incompetent and biased. Get him the hell out of here.
Crosby,
get him the hell out of here.
Yeah, he needs that. They need to bounce him the fuck up out of there. I don't know what they're doing.
You want some shit that Burrito rants about? Say Doug Crosby. Say Doug Crosby once more, motherfucker.
Yeah, I've been with him for those. And then the fact that the UFC travels, they bring this guy overseas and stuff when they don't have commissions. They select Doug Crosby. We want you to sit there cage side and fuck things up. Man, you can't
never forget that interview he did. Where he kind of literally laughed off that there was controversy and that there was a bias and there was a situation. He laughed about it.
He loves it. He thinks he's triggering all the MMA nerds by ruining fights.
He's a pre-Colby.
All right, so we did touch on this a little bit, but I think it definitely. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do think it's necessary to once again wave the finger at Scott Coker and say, bad Scotty, because we had Bellator 227 divided into a Bellator Dublin card as well, and tape delayed, and just all sorts of foolishness going on, making it very difficult to just watch the product. So I guess the question now is, like, who is their target audience if they're doing this sort of stuff?
Nobody. They want no one to watch their shows.
Yeah.
Their target audience, is people who just woke up from a 15-year coma and don't realize yet that DVRs are not a thing anymore and Twitter is a thing now.
Yeah. And they're wondering where Spike TV went on their menu. So I'm very confused by why they keep doing this. And here's the only thing I could come up with is that maybe, just maybe, they're thinking, all right, so if we air this tape delayed, we'll pick up some stray viewers who just happen to be channel surfing.
Sure.
However, like, but does that hurt why prevent the actual fans from watching it live? You can have both, and quite frankly, is it going to pull in that many viewers anyway?
Well, for me, the biggest issue isn't even the tape delay. Now, tape delay sports in 2019 should not be a thing, but when they sent out the big press release with their 17-fight card, and the prelims of 227 are on their website, and then the main card is on Paramount, and then the Dublin main card is on this, and the prelims for that are on something else, I can't wrap my head around it. I'm not that smart, and then I just say, okay, well, I guess I'm not watching any of it. So, I don't know if there's anyone smart enough in MMA to figure it out. And not to speak for you guys, but maybe Jay. But,
it's only because Jay's more determined. I gave up too. I said the hell with this.
Jay, I mean, he is smarter than I am, but mostly he's more determined.
I'm dogged, and I had to watch these silly fights on here. I had to watch 4 fights, 4 of them. They added the prelim because
when the UFC used to do this, it was annoying, but you at least understood why. Like when they had 2 fights on Facebook and 3 on Fight Pass, and you at least understood why. They had their fingers in a lot of pots. They had obligations to meet on a bunch of platforms. You could understand why they were doing it. Here, there's just no reason. Like, why are you doing this?
I think I might have a reason, and it's not a happy thing. I think the zone deal for everybody is going sour. I think that the 1 year with the zone was the signing up for a cable package and getting the perks and the you have 1 year free HBO. No, but in all honesty, 1 year Combate Americas, it's a Latin American promotion for those who aren't familiar, was signed to DAZN, and they put all of their events, every single one, in some way be found on DAZN. This happened for exactly 1 year, and now. And then they still have an agreement with them. But now the only card until the end of the year for Combate Americas will be Copa Combate, which is their big one-night tournament with a whole bunch of fighters going on. So that's the only card they're televising. Meanwhile, there are about 12 more along the way. I think this DAZN thing, they're realizing they spent more money than they wanted to. We've heard this about they're overpaying some of their boxing talent. They're overdoing it.
They're overpaying one of their boxing talent.
They're overpaying one of their boxing. Anyway, they're throwing more money and getting less return than I believe they want, and that is causing them to pull back immediately. That's why. I mean, I don't know if this is possible now, but there is not a way to watch several fights from 227 now. You can't see them. They don't exist, and that's crazy. That's nonsense. That doesn't even for me, a crazy person about this fight game, can't watch these fights, and I can't figure it out. We got a big problem here.
If all 4 of us we're all paid members of the media, we get a check to watch fights and talk about them and write about them. We gave up. like that just says what it is. Like there's money in it for us, and we just said fuck it. Like that's how ridiculous this is. So like Bellator, please knock that shit off. Just knock it all the way off. All right, so we got to talk about the true event that Bellator brought. And granted, 227 did have some good names on there. Had a few moments worth watching if you could actually watch it. But 228 was where it was at. That's where I was at. That's where Nick was at in the forum in Inglewood. So. Now, the biggest thing about that, of course, AJ McKee's knockout was fantastic, but I think the highlight of the show, or the low light of the show, depending on which perspective you have, was the selection show for the featherweight Grand Prix tournament. Now, I'm gonna start it off with you guys, Jay and Ben, because Nick and I think we have a different experience since we were in the arena. But what was your guys' take on that selection show? Did it play out well on television? Was it entertaining? Or what were your initial thoughts?
Go ahead,
okay, skip me because I tapped out. I can't wait to hear your I can't wait to hear your take on it.
Okay, so it was interesting and it was innovative, but it was horribly timed. It was for those that don't follow Bellator nearly as much as they shouldn't. Um, they had an entire card all the way through, and they had the four fights of their tournament, and then there's a main event. But in between the main event and these tournament fights, there was a 30-minute tournament selection show that played out kind of like, a hybrid Price is Right / game show. I want to pick this kind of nonsense. Um, it was an experiment. It worked out to an extent, but even as a home audience, I had to ask, how is it? How is it playing? Because I couldn't hear the crowd shouting. When I heard about this and I had to figure out what was happening, that's another problem. I had to barely hang on to find out the rules of this selection show. Um, I had hoped that it would play out like a game show. They'd have the contestant, the fighter that was going to pick the specific spot, and they get to choose their opponent, and they'd have the crowd from all over yelling, "Oh, fight Pitbull, fight show, whatever." No, they just kind of didn't. It didn't play off like that. It played like standing around, looking around, and going, "Okay, now what do we do?" But you know what? The biggest thing about this, I think this played out just fine. It was a spectacle, and Bellator loves a spectacle. They love it. They love it. They love it. But this could get really old really quickly. So we got to be careful here, Bellator.
Interesting take, because in the arena, and Nick, please correct me if you're feeling any different way about this, but I think I can speak for you on this one because we were standing beside each other and exulting praises on Bellator. Like it's all smiles. Me, you, James Lynch, a couple other Drake Riggs of Body Lock. We're all standing next to each other and just like, oh, this is fire! Like this is crazy. Now, where we were sitting, we were close enough to the stage, close enough to the runway, and close enough to like the fans and coaches and stuff. They kind of rushed to this one area. So I didn't look back behind me. I don't know what the rest of the crowd was feeling, but where we were sitting, it played very well, and it played just like the game show you were anticipating. So if there were audio issues on the broadcast, we didn't experience that at all, obviously, but I loved it, and I love the fact that the champ's choice was something that they didn't tell anyone about until the moment of.
That was
Nick,
a good call.
Please share with me your thoughts as you were watching this with me.
No, I agree with you, Anton. I think it was even more effective because we were off to the side to where the stage was, but we were behind them, so we could see the bracket on the big screen, sort of to our right, and then the fighter was standing there, so we could see the back of the fighter as they're looking up, talking with their coach, deciding. So just exactly where we were made it even more effective and just better. But aside from that, I think the whole thing was good. I was a bit worried about, because it was the first time they were doing anything like this. I was wondering, especially when it comes to the broadcast, are they going to mess this up? Like, is this going to go well? Is it going to go smooth? I thought Mauro did a good job with just moving it along, and it didn't take too long, I felt. I liked it as far as how it played out and the actual, what it meant for the tournament. I liked it. I think we saw that sometimes it might bite you in the butt, just because with the fighters, they're picking the smart fights and the smart dates. You're not going to have Pitbull go and pick AJ and McKee in the quarterfinals in January, because that's the toughest fight he has in this tournament. He's going to go fight the easy, or in his mind, the easier fighter in Pedro Carvalho. And Scott Coker said after the fact, I would have rathered him fight Caldwell, but so be it. So I think that's the one negative about how they did this, is by giving the fighters this much power, sometimes the fights aren't going to be as big as you might hope for.
Well, and not to sound like I'm poo-pooing on the entire idea, because it's a novel idea. It's an interesting concept, and it's not just from a fatigue perspective, because there were still 5 fights that happened to happen after this show that happened. There were actually 5 fights that had to happen after this went on. The fighters were really into it. AJ McKee he wanted to be the star of the show, and there were some moments like that where he was like, "I want to fight you," and Pitbull was looking around to survey the scene, and McKee is going, "I want to fight you. I want this right now." So they did make it more interesting. But then there were also parts that the fighters would be sitting there, and they, they're, what's next for you? And they'd hold up their card like they were at like an auction or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting experience from my perspective.
Yeah, and one thing that I think this really proved, and Nick, I do like your assessment of this. So I just want to kind of add on to this thought about the matchups kind of not being what we were hoping they were to an extent, but this proved that this is the fight business. These gentlemen all see $1 million prize at the end of the rainbow, and the idea is not to go in there and just create Rock'em Sock'em Robot, just bloodfest in the first round. The idea is to get to the finale and win that $1 million prize. Yeah. So everyone is going to take whatever path is of the least resistance to them. They're going to say, okay, if my foot is bothering me, as I can't remember which fighter said, he had some problem with his foot, so he wanted to he wanted to fight later on. So like you have a little nagging injury.
Maybe to Weishel. I saw Weishel limping Sunday morning. I think so.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense then. So for him to say, hey, my foot hurts, so I want this to heal because I want the best chance to win. And I don't like this particular style matchup just yet. That might be a war. So I'd rather have that war for the last fight. So there becomes a great deal of strategy, and that strategy is tinged with business, with the idea that we are prize fighting and we need to get the prize. All right. So now we're going to move on to my favorite title for any show segment in the world, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. I want you guys to share with me the things that surprise you the most about either UFC Copenhagen, Bellator Dublin / Bellator 227 / Bellator The Lost Tapes, or Bellator 228. Anything related to pre-fight coverage, the fight themselves, or post-fight. Jay, my man, who named this beautiful segment, please kick it off.
All right. I was very, very surprised that Antonio McKee, all of 49 years of age, not only won a fight, which was kind of to be expected, but won a fight by knockout, TKO, but he won a fight by stoppage. Okay. Not the first time this has ever happened.
But close.
He lifted his impressive stoppage rate to 30% with that second round knockout of William Sriapai. But let me lace a few McKee stats to use a term of the brain nature. So McKee and his opponent made their MMA debuts. Both of them made their MMA debuts in October of 1999. Both of them made their debuts in that month in LA, and both of them won their debuts in LA by stoppage. And at the time, AJ McKee, who is the son of Antonio McKee and is 15-0 with a exciting knockout at this card, was 4 at the time. The last time McKee, who fought, was in November 2014. And his son, who again is 15-0, had yet to make his pro debut. So they staggered that way. And the last stat, 96 years of age between the two men, but it's still not the oldest Bellator fight. Just remember, boys, we had Royce Gracie Ken Shamrock, number 3 or 4 or 5 or 12, The Revenge, at 101 years of age. So this didn't break that record, but it came darn close. So yeah, Antonio McKee finished a fight in 2019. Whoa.
Bellator gonna Bellator. All right. So, all right, Nick. So share with me what has you surprised, Mr. Falcons?
Well, to go with his son, AJ, I mean, I was not... Okay, I was picking AJ McKee. He was a minus 450, minus 500, something crazy favorite over Georgie Carey-Canyon. I think that was deserved. I didn't give Georgie a huge shot in this fight. I think we were talking during the official weigh-ins, and we were sort of just going back and forth what's like the most intriguing fight. And I was saying McKee, Carey-Canyon, on paper, it's like a cool fight, but I'm pretty sure I know AJ is going to win, so I don't love it. But I was not expecting an 8-second knockout. Maybe nobody was. But I think the point here is that he's not a huge finisher. I mean, his past, I think, couple fights have been decisions. The Pat Curran fight, a big win because Curran's a former champion. one of sort of the more notable Bellator fighters in history, but it was lackluster. It wasn't the most exciting fight. I was there for it cage side, and I was falling asleep. AJ McKee goes out there and starches Georgie in 8 seconds, has everybody talking about him, steals the night on a big night for Bellator, goes into the quarterfinals with all this momentum, more momentum than he had, and I mean, I wasn't expecting any of it. Georgie is tough. Georgie doesn't get knocked out like that very often. Not in 8 seconds, but he doesn't get knocked out, period, very often. So I was surprised that AJ not only won a fight by finish, but in 8 seconds.
All right. And Ben, tell me, what surprised you, Mr. Falcons?
Well, I mean, between UFC Copenhagen and Bellator 228, there were 11 main card fights, and I went 3 for 8 on those main card fights. So needless to say, it was a weekend full of surprises for me. I have an embarrassment of riches, quite literally, from which to choose here. And for that reason, I'm going to dip down into the undercard. There were plenty of fighters who really turned in surprising performances, either in a positive or a negative way. I was surprised in a not positive way by Macy Chiasson versus Lena Landsberg. Yeah. This was set up to be kind of a coming out party for Macy Chiasson. And you can tell that by the cue cards that the UFC booth obviously had in their hands, talking about how she's at Fortis MMA. Everyone at Fortis is talking about how amazing she is. And the thing is, I agree. I think she has all kinds of upside at both 135 and 145. But at the same time, she has 6 pro fights.
Yep.
She's 28 years old, but she is young in terms of mileage. You know, for a woman that size, it is hard to find fights in Louisiana and Texas, let me tell you. So she laid an egg. She came out flat. She didn't make the adjustments her corner was telling her to make in between rounds, and she just straight up kind of got dominated by Landsberg. I mean, there was no moment where I thought, oh man, she's going to get finished. But also, there wasn't really any moment past about the 6-minute mark where I was like, she's going to turn this around and win it. Mm-hmm. Like it felt like the fight was going a particular way, and that's how it played out. And so even though the final 2/3 of the fight were not terribly surprising, the overall performance was a surprise to me. She'll be back. I still think she'll be a UFC champion at one point, but that, even in an especially bad weekend for me of picking fights, even by my own dismal standards, was the most surprising moment.
All right. So, like you, Ben, I have kind of spoiled for choice for things that surprised me over the weekend. My picks were much better, thank God, but I was very surprised by a few things. Yes, Ben, they were better than you. Probably won't last long though. So let me get off my high horse because you are killing me in the picks right now. That's another story. So I did a couple of things. One, for instance, Ian Cutelaba just annihilated Khalil Rountree. I'm surprised that we all forgot that Khalil Rountree is not very good on the ground. Everybody was talking about Khalil Rountree being, this new
Lumpinee champion.
Yeah. Oh my God, the Muay Thai on this guy just so sensational. But Muay Thai is not very effective when you're on your back. So there's that. Another one. I was surprised to see both AJ McKee and Georgie Karakhanyan's manhood. They did put on a full display for everyone at the weigh-in. So there was that. But the most shocking thing to me, much more serious note, I spoke at length with Antonio McKee at Media Day. You can check the interview out on sherdog.com's YouTube page. But we spoke for a while, and he said that he was part of the antitrust suit that's going on now. He dropped out when he was receiving a lot of racist death threats, and he thought that this was going to have a negative effect on his son's career. So he decided to bow out and support it from afar. So definitely, I would recommend everybody to check that interview out. A lot of interesting nuggets there that Antonio McKee dropped. Gone from the game for quite some time, but he has not lost a bit of intelligence and outspokenness. So definitely suggest you all check that one out.
Let the record show that seeing multiple dicks was not the most surprising thing that happened to Anthony Walker this past weekend. Make of that what you will.
Yeah. Hey. You should see me on a Wednesday.
I was going to say that. You said it.
Now, there was one thing that was a very unpleasant surprise, but it shouldn't have been a surprise because this topic keeps coming up, and I keep wanting to slam my fist through a fucking screen as a result. Wanderlei Silva, the axe murderer, one of the greatest fighters of all time, fan favorite, who just recently was talking about having CTE symptoms, and Bellator won't sign. Bellator. Let me just state that again. Bellator will not give this guy a fight right now. Bellator, as Jay mentioned just a few minutes ago, had a combined age of 101 years in the cage.
Yep.
Bellator that also had Kimbo Slice scheduled to compete a month after he died of heart failure.
Mm.
And the Bellator that killed Dada 10 times or whatever.
Did.
Yeah.
He had a heart attack. That's truth.
Yes, Bellator will not give Wanderlei Silva a fight, despite the name value that he has. But you know who will? Your man's in them, David Feldman of BKFC, who signed Wanderlei Silva to a deal over the weekend. I want to say Amy Kaplan broke the news.
Yes.
I think Amy broke that news. Now, his opponent is going to be announced at an upcoming October event headlined by fellow chin-deprived Antonio Silva and Gabriel Gonzaga.
What are you talking
fellas,
about? He's the Western Hemisphere's largest strategic stockpile of chin. Have you seen the guy? It just doesn't stand up to getting punched very well.
Oh, man. At this point, I don't know what to say. And forgive me for rambling on without any sort of articulate thoughts, but I think I'm gone beyond articulation. Someone, please jump in.
No articulation is needed when we're talking about Wanderlei Silva in 2019 fighting in a bare-knuckle boxing match. It's not possible.
What are we doing here at this point? Please tell me what we're doing here.
Well, I mean, it's understandable why these old names are going there. What happens to every fighter as they age into their late 30s, and if they keep fighting past 40, into their 40s, whether they're still competitive at that point or they've fallen off a cliff, what happens to all of them? They start leaning on their stand-up and get reluctant to go to the ground. Whether you're talking about Fedor, Rampage, Wanderlei, any of those guys, they turn away from their ground game and they just want to stand, whether it's to their detriment or to their benefit. And what could be a better retirement plan for those guys than some place where they can make $8,000 and have no chance of going to the ground unless it's unconscious?
At this point, like this is just ghoulish. Now I know, and not to say that the UFC or Bellator or Combate or any promotion out there is doing the Lord's work right now, because that's certainly not the case. There's.
It would depend on what Lord you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's not like they're out there, spreading good cheer in the world and doing things completely right and completely fair. But this has gone to pure ghoulish territory. This is pretty sickening.
Like what commission would where is this fight taking place? Do we know?
Yeah, nothing's been announced yet that I've heard of, at least.
I guarantee you, it will be east of me along I-10. It will be Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, or Florida. Guaranteed. Or on a reservation.
Yeah, it makes sense because especially if the plans to bring Alexander Emelianenko are still in play, fuck this topic.
I just don't. Why are they doing this to us? BK is going to keep hurting us with this. Look at the fight that you mentioned. The fight that's headlining the card they're going to announce. That we have Bigfoot Silva and Gabriel Gonzaga's 61 fights, 20 knockout losses combined between the two of them.
Ugh.
Why? They're both 40 years old. They're, way beyond the end of their careers. Wanderlei Silva's 43. Said he's dealing with CTE. To say this is a cash grab would imply there is cash to grab. But therein lies the problem. They're fighting in venues that have 1,000 people in them. Biloxi Coast Coliseum is not a large place. The venue in Wyoming, I can't remember the name of it, not a big place. There's not a big gate to have. Malignaggi Lobov did 18,000 views on pay-per-view, and that's their best, apparently. There's no market for it that they keep thinking there is. They threw over 6 figures at Malignaggi, but how can they do this? This is my personal issue with bare knuckle. There's not a goal in sight. They're always going to have to fight with legitimacy and legality from state to state. You thought that the UFC had problems getting MMA legal in New York? Are you kidding me? New York would vomit at the sight of bare knuckle boxing. Sure, yeah, we can say that, people thought the same thing about MMA back when it was in its infancy and it was barbaric and that. We're not trying to say that. But there's a big difference between that kind of fighting and 40-plus-year-olds with chins that don't exist anymore, getting a chance for a big payday and a chance to break their hands in front of Biloxi, Mississippi. It just stop. Please stop.
Yeah, like it'll be one thing if the original UFC tournaments, like they willed out, Joe Louis
Sure.
as he was, on his deathbed and threw him in the cage. That's essentially what BKFC is doing right now.
Yeah.
So at least the early UFC tournaments, it viscerally was something that shocked a lot of people, but they were, viable of age athletes that weren't, broken down and worn down from years of getting hit upside the head. So there's that. I don't want to give these guys any more attention than that. So let's dead that one, unless anyone has any thoughts to conclude it. Going once, going twice, sold. All right, now it's time for the speed bag, and this is my favorite time to exert my power and my influence because, like I can't be stopped. I'm incredible. So we are going to change things up. Normally we give 30 seconds for a question, one question per person, but we'll mix it up a little bit. This is going to be 30 seconds total, but you each get 10 seconds each to answer every question. So, Ben, come through for me in the clutch, my man. Come on. I know you got 15 seconds worth of commentary on one of these questions. so you go ahead and give that a try, player. So I'm going to start with you, my man. With 8 fighters left in the Bellator featherweight Grand Prix, who do you think is going to win it all, and who is your dark horse? You have 10 seconds. Let's do it.
The favorite is obviously Pitbull. The hot pick is McKee, but my sleeper pick is Adam Boric. Stop.
Whew.
So disappointing. This man followed the rules this time. Nick, please, make me a happy man. Let me cut you off. You got 10 seconds. Your dark horse for the Grand Prix, or who do you think is going to win? Let's do it.
I agree. Dark horse is Boric, and who's going to win is Pitbull.
Nick, just disappointing me with your rule following. Now, Jay, come on, man. I know.
I should do it on purpose.
Tell me a story, Jay, in 10 seconds. Let's do it.
All right, tell me a story. Pitbull's going to win it all. The way he handled Archuleta was clinical. Beat him every facet of the game. But Boric is my dark horse like everybody else.
Oh,
I know. Sorry, Charlie.
9.6 seconds.
Sorry,
Why?
Charlie.
Why are you doing this to me? All right. So now we're going to go to the second question here. Now I'll start again with you, Ben. Did the UFC make the right call releasing BJ Penn? What does the future hold for the much maligned lightweight / welterweight / one-time light heavyweight? Let's get this work, Ben. 10 seconds.
UFC made the right call. I mean, the losing streak and the outside the cage bullshit would have been enough for any other fighter. Bellator's going to offer him a fight in Hawaii, and he'll take it.
Damn it, I thought you were going to go over on this one. So, Nick, this is your chance. Make me happy. Embarrass yourself. You got 10 seconds. Let's get this work.
Okay. No, they already screwed it up. Great. Okay, and you can just
no, I'll be fair. You are a guest, Nick, and you are taller than me. You have a reach advantage. I don't want you to kick my ass next time I see you.
Fair.
Can you tell me whether or not releasing BJ Penn was the right call, and what does the future hold for him? 10 seconds.
It was the right call, and probably a bare-knuckle boxing fight against Wanderlei Silva.
God damn you for speaking that into existence. You're probably right, though. Jay,
Oh, no.
tell me. 10 seconds, man.
This is why we can't have nice things. I'm glad they're moving on, but now that he's a free agent, Bellator Hawaii, or what else? One?
Oh, my God. He just just one word over. It wasn't enough. It didn't feel powerful enough to stop you there.
I'm not going to say One FC, though.
All right. Now, last question. And I'll mix up the order this time. Nick, you'll be the one to jump this off. Having Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington on UFC 245 in December, do you think the promotion should stack 3 title fights on one single card? You have 10 seconds. Let's do it.
I think so, because I don't think Usman and Covington can sell a whole Vegas pay-per-view card on its own. Having Holloway Volkanovski on there is going to make it even bigger.
Oh, my God. 1 second under time and so perfectly stated. Nick, you're a legend. Jay, your turn, man. You've got 10 seconds. Let's do it.
3 title fights is too many. It doesn't matter. 3 25-minute fights is just too much. We're not boxing fans. What do they expect out of us?
All right. And 9.5 seconds. Good work there. Ben, you are the one to drop 10 seconds of knowledge on this topic next. UFC 245, 3 title fights. Does it make sense? Let's do it.
Go for it, because at least one of the 3 is going to fall off between now and then. And Usman-Covington has every possibility of being an awful fight.
All right. Well said and under time. So I guess I will give myself 30 seconds to answer all 3.
Start the clock.
In one fell swoop. All right, so my dark horse for the featherweight Grand Prix is Darian Caldwell. I think AJ McKee is going to be the eventual winner. BJ Penn should have been gone from the UFC, but I think he's going to get a call from Dave Feldman. And Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington makes sense to have as a 3rd title fight, because why not stack it as the year-end card? Oh my goodness.
Whew.
Way under time. So beautifully stated. Let's get this work.
So I'm gonna mess things up here to throw something else on here. I'm concerned about the way that the UFC is stacking cards now, and then we've been talking about this a lot lately. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a boxing model, but it's a card that, and we're going to discuss this, I'm sure, in very great length very shortly, where they'll stack a card with one great fight, a good fight, and then local, and then fights that you have to cherry pick along the way. This is a frequent recurring theme. We've had show after show where we've been talking about this model. Am I missing something? Has it always been this way, or is it just the way things have been lately? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's a symptom of things as of late in the last several years, where if you put on 40 to 50 cards a year, like, there's only so many fighters you can throw on there, and then so many injuries, USADA violations, contract negotiations. There's so many ways that this can go wrong that you don't have enough people that are stars to hope to stack pay-per-views to a certain extent. So then it gets down to where the guys like us that know a lot about some of the up and coming guys that maybe we can anticipate a few matchups here and there, but even still, it's like you're kind of scraping from the bottom of the barrel in a lot of cases.
What do you guys think, Duffy?
Yeah, I think it's just the continuation of the way things have been going. I mean, this afternoon I was kind of going in the Wayback Machine because I was thinking about Jason Von Flue for obvious reasons. And that fight night that he landed the original Von Flue choke on, that card had 8 fights on it. In fact, he was the first fight of the night. They were the curtain jerker. Second or third fight of the night was Bang Ludwig with his record-setting, nasty, straight right that floored Jonathan Goulet. Cards were shorter. They were fewer and further between. It was easier to keep up with who was fighting and who they were fighting next and what was going on. So yeah, I mean, it's the way it is now, and we're just kind of headed further and further in that direction.
What do you think, Nick? Do you think that, I'd like to bounce off what you said earlier, do you think that having 3 title fights on the card would just hurt the rest of them around it? Because even though, not every title fight's created equal, it's hard to say one of these 3 by themselves might be able to, I mean, the best one of the three, maybe what Nunes Durandamy, that's on that card, right? That of the three, that feels like the one that could by itself headline a card just because of Nunes. I mean, maybe you can do the Usman-Colby thing. I don't know. Does it hurt cards? Does it hurt everything else when you stack them up like that?
I would say yes, because like it's kind of already been talked about, but we see cards, we'll see one big pay-per-view and then we'll see two pretty bad pay-per-views. And this is something that will just exactly. And the thing with this weekend's card is it's one great fight, another solid pay-per-view caliber fight, and then dog shit for the rest of it, if I'm being completely honest. So I mean, the Edmonton card was all right. We had Jones, yeah, I mean, every other pay-per-view card is not worthy of being a pay-per-view card, and that is to an extent a result of putting 2 or 3 title fights on these big cards. But we're in a time now when we need to put 2 big title fights on a card sometimes, because people just won't care enough. I mean, if it's not stacked, to the ceiling, people aren't going to buy it. I mean, I feel like people in general, interest is going down, so they feel the need to stack cards, but then that affects other cards. And really it just comes down to they're putting on 40 cards a year, and that's way too many. And so it's not just a result of stacking, putting 3 title fights on a card, that's one, but it's also just there's way too many cards. Fight nights, ESPNs, whatever. There's way too many cards.
And then getting back to what Ben said, it's like to have too many cards and then to have too many fights on the card too. So not only it'd be one thing if you had 40 cards a year, but they all were 8 fights. Mm-hmm. Then you got a lot more wiggle room. But when you have
40 cards 13, with 12 fights each,
that's pretty nuts. So it's something's got to give. And speaking of cards that aren't quite stacked, we
can always bring back BJ Penn and Wanderlei Silva though to really sell a pay-per-view.
That'll really do it. Might as well have Alexander Emelianenko step in there as well. So UFC 243, one of the least stacked cards and pay-per-view wise of the year, but it's headlined by probably the best fight that you can think of right now. I guess aside from like Khabib Tony, Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya, the bee's knees, man, of a fight. So now I did just get finished trashing this card overall, but are there any sleeper fights on this? Anything that stands out to you? And I'm going to start with you, Nick, because Ben and Jay, I know y'all got like 6 fights that y'all got a lot of stats on. So
I think
Nick,
you'd be surprised.
I mean, I'm looking at the card right now, and other than the co-main event between Ali Aquinta and Dan Hooker, which is a phenomenal fight, there's nothing. Like Tai Tuivasa versus Sergey Spivak does very little for me. Diego Lima versus Luke Jamo could be an interesting fight to a degree, but that's not a pay-per-view fight. Jorgen De Castro, I like him. He's a good interview, but this is his UFC debut. He's a middle of the road at best heavyweight right now, as far as we can tell, and he's on pay-per-view. Holly Holm was supposed to be on the card against Rachel Pennington. That's off now. I know I'm not James Lynch. I don't follow every regional fighter on the planet, but there's nothing for me.
No. All right, Jay. I'd like to hear what's your anything on this card that stands out to you.
I kind of had this discussion with one of our other staff members today about how losing Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington was a big blow to the card. And it was a big blow to the card not just because it was a fight between 2 ranked women in the division, but because of the significance for Holly Holm being in that arena after what she did the last time they were there, when she fought Ronda Rousey and did that thing. So, it's a kind of a card that I look at it, and I'm not speaking this into existence. I'm just floating the horrible thought out there, and you can blame me and burn my house down if I'm right or whatever. If the main event fell off the card, there's no card. Period. You can't. It's the kind of card that you could not even turn into a fight night card, and that is no disrespect to the fighters on the card. I know them, basically all of them, except for 2 of them I've never seen fight. 3 of them I've never seen fight before, which is unusual. But it's a card that questions how it came to be, because they tried to challenge the all-time attendance record with a phenomenal fight and then a great co-main. It's relevant. It's in L.I. Quinta and Dan Hooker, number 6, number 5. Lightweight scrap, checks the boxes of a hometown guy and a striker's delight, and okay, that's fun. And then you look and go, what do we do now? What are we doing here? I mean, a heavyweight fight between a 3-0 and a 5-0 guy that hit each other on the head till one falls down, and we go, okay. I can't sugarcoat it. I'm the guy. I'm the silver lining guy. I'm the watch out for this fight. Okay, fine. Khalid Taha, Bruno Silva could be fun at bantamweight. That could be fun. But if I'm gonna have to sell you this card, we're doing something horribly wrong here. And this is a pay-per-view card. Dios mio, what are we doing?
I'll tell you what we're doing. You know what's interesting about Khalid Taha versus Bruno Silva? It is the only fight on the card that does not feature an Oceanic fighter. This is the UFC completely banking on selling it out. And, I mean, you can tell by the way they're talking about it. They are already pumping up as this is going to be the biggest combat sports event in Australian history. This is going to break all of our gate records. Yeah. It's all they're banking on. It's very rare that you see the UFC so obviously leaning on live gate to carry an event versus pay-per-view. But that's exactly what they're doing here. And I only know this because I edit our Australian correspondent, Jacob Debbits, and he has put about 6 of these people on his prospect watch, so I know who the hell they are. Otherwise I'd be like, what the fuck is this card? No, there's 12 fights, and the last 11 of them all feature an Oceanic fighter, and in most cases, an Oceanic fighter booked into a chance to shine and show well. The headline fight is, with the possible exception of Khabib versus Poirier, like the most compelling title fight this year on paper. And if it delivers anything close to what it should deliver, it'll be the fight of the night. If it isn't, your sleeper for fight of the night is Nadia Kassem versus Ji Yeon Kim. Okay, both of these women are aggro as fuck. I love this fight. Ji Yeon Kim fulfills all the stereotypes of the South Korean fighter. I mean, she would, like, it took Antonina Shevchenko to make her look boring. But Antonina Shevchenko is the wet blanket Shevchenko. Like, you know, she's just, I don't mean that as a bad thing. She's not a bad fighter, but she does not fight like her sister. She is rangy. She uses her jab and her kicks to establish distance. She's extremely buttoned up. Like, it's hard for her to look amazing in her fights, and it's even harder for her opponent to look amazing. So that kind of threw the wet blanket on Kim, but normally she's a psycho. Nadia Kassem is a psycho. Like, she is, you don't think it when you see her during fight week with, like, big the glasses. Most impressive pair of glasses this side of Eric Albarracin, but she's a psycho in the cage. Like, that right there, if the main event fails to deliver on any level, is your fight of the night.
I have to say, aside from, of course, the main and co-main, one interesting thing about this card is the appearance of Megan Anderson. Obviously, she is from Australia, but she's fighting a woman by the name of Zara dos Santos, who is making her UFC debut from France. And it kind of just shows you where the UFC is looking at her now, because she was someone that they really banked on challenging Cyborg for the featherweight title. She was someone that they were banking on as a star. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she's still part of the broadcast crew for Invicta. Mm-hmm. So this is someone that I think the promotion had a lot of high hopes for, and now we see her in her home country so low on a pay-per-view card against a debuting fighter. Just kind of show you that things didn't pan out exactly the way the UFC anticipated.
And I mean, she has irons in a lot of fires. You know, she has a, let's say, very prolific Instagram. You know, she's doing a lot of, like, kind of modeling things. She does the Invicta thing. You know, after every fight, she steps over the cage like Tyson Fury entering a boxing ring and interviews the winning fighter who speaks to her elbow.
Stands next to Alicia Sapatella and goes, hey,
Alicia Sapatella talks to her elbow for 2 minutes. So she's got a lot of stuff going on. Who knows how committed she even is? to, becoming a champion at MMA. But when I said oceanic fighters booked in fights where they might be expected to shine, none more than this one.
Definitely good points there by all. Now, we're going to move to the final segment, and that is Buried Treasure. So I'd like you guys to share with me an MMA story over the last week that should have gotten greater coverage, or just something that might be pretty cool that you don't think enough people are talking about. So I'm going to start with you, Jay.
All right, let me tell you guys a story. So we know about the LFA. They ended their broadcast deal with Access TV, and they've gone dark, and they're going to arrange in the future. Hopefully, they'll get another broadcast deal. Great promotion. Been writing about them for a while now. So on this dark event that they're hoping to broadcast later, they have the finals of their heavyweight tournament that they'd be building up. It's their first. Their first. Oh, there you go. There's a little buddy. LFA 77 was, again, it was the heavyweight tournament finals, their first tournament, and it was going to go big. They were going to go crazy, and it was going to be fun. It was going to be for the championship and everything. So right before it happens, one of the two challengers, again, heavyweight tournament, misses weight by about 7 pounds. So he's ineligible to miss the to win the title. So yeah, been covering the sport a good while. Probably could count on these two hands the number of heavyweights I can recall that have ever missed the 266-pound weight allowance. So he missed weight, couldn't win the title. And so just a quick little backstory. Martin advanced. He got his shot in the finals by winning by disqualification by getting punched in the back of the head repeatedly. So he gets to the finals, and Daniel James wins by knocking out his opponent in the first round. So they meet head-to-head and go 5 hard rounds, and then Daniel James proceeds to repeatedly knee Brett Martin in the head with illegal knees. So Brett Martin, the man who missed weight by 7 pounds, was awarded the win by disqualification. So he is not the heavyweight champion. There is no heavyweight champion, and it is the first tournament I've ever heard of where, yes, I know it's exhausting, that the first tournament I've ever heard of where the winner runs the table by DQ. So that whole tournament, it basically never existed. So there it is. Sorry, LFA. I wish I could say a more positive light to your story, but it is what it is.
All right, Ben, tell me, what's your buried treasure for this week?
What did I say I was going to talk about? Do you remember, Jay?
You were going to talk about stuff and things. I can't be helpful here. Eddie,
thank you. Eddie Alvarez withdrew from the One Championship lightweight tournament and is being replaced by Christian Lee. I feel bad saying this, but I think it's about time to call Eddie Alvarez's run in One Championship a bust, And again, that makes me feel bad to say because I have actively gone out of my way to see this man fight for 15 years. Like, he is just the very epitome of like a fan favorite type fighter, just the perfect attitude, the perfect fight style, just the very definition of a reliable action fighter who was also a championship level world-class fighter. But even when he left the UFC, he seemed like just a bit of a spent force. And kind of when he left the UFC and signed with One, my best hope for him was that he'd sign with One, cash a couple of outlandishly large paychecks while looking in rare physical form,
taking his vitamins then.
And if there were any left after Brandon Vera got to the stack, and then swing off into the sunset. The guy has a big family. He's been very open over the years about how I don't have much of a retirement plan. I have to keep fighting. I'm not a millionaire. At least that's what he was saying, 8 years ago. And that's what I hoped for him. And even that has not materialized. He looked terrible in his first fight in a Grand Prix that was essentially built around him He's not even going to make it out of the starting blocks, and that's just a bummer.
Yeah. All right, Nick, tell me what's your buried treasure for the week?
I have two, because the first one I don't know tons about, but I know it's important enough that people should be talking about it. The IPO collapse for Endeavor. They were, of course, set to go public pretty soon, and now that has all been delayed due to apparent unstable market conditions. I'm not. If you want to know more about this, Bloody Elbow, John Nash has done a lot of great stuff on it. Paul Gift from Forbes has also done a lot of great stuff on it. So I'm not your guy, but I'm smart enough to know that this is a big deal. Like this definitely has some impact on the UFC. I can't tell you exactly what that is, but no one's been talking about it. I haven't heard a thing about it since this happened a few days ago, and I think we probably should be hearing more about it. The other thing is a lighter note. Something I just noticed while covering Bellator last week in LA is the Pitbull Brothers are starting to learn English. And this isn't really like an MMA story, but it's just something to note. Because I covered Patricio's last fight in Chicago in May, and my interview with him was 100% through a translator. Also interviewed Patricio that week. Same thing. This week, 99% of both my interviews with both of them was them speaking English. And so I think as two of the bigger Bellator fighters, learning English is always a good idea. It's going to help their careers, and it just helps us because Eric, their coach, Captain Eric, said after we were talking after the interview with Patricio this week, and he said, "Yeah, I don't really remember what the guy says. I just make up half the translation anyway. So I guess this is good for accuracy's sake also."
Yeah, so I definitely want to comment on both of your buried buried treasures. So the first one being the your first one
The
was
IPO.
the IPO. Our Patrick Auger at Sherdog and Bodylock, he did drop an op-ed. I think it came out today, specifically about how the IPO can affect the UFC since it didn't come out. So check that out. And we have Paul Gift and John Nash have some excellent work as well, as you said, related to this. Now, also the Pitbull Brothers interviews. I had the privilege of interviewing Patricio a couple of times, and since I interviewed him for a media day a couple of months back, his English has greatly improved. The first interview was entirely through Ed Soares, and this one was 99% Pitbull, and a couple of little anecdotes there from Captain Eric as well. So pretty cool stuff there. Now my buried treasure for the week is not exactly MMA related, but it's something that can affect MMA at some point. Now, in 2023, a law will be passed. A law will go into effect that was passed today by California Governor Gavin Newsom, known as the Fair Pay to Play Act, which allows college athletes to be financially compensated for the use of their likeness and image, along with just play on the field because their bodies are generating millions and billions of dollars. Now, how this affects MMA, after all, where no MMA personalities were involved in this legislation that I'm aware of, although wouldn't be surprised if I think Andrew Yang, who's kind of like a fringe character in MMA in the presidential race right now, think he might have had something to do with this as well. But before we go on that tangent, how it can affect MMA, wrestling isn't a money maker of a sport necessarily for these big athletic schools, but money has always been cited as a reason why collegiate wrestlers turn to MMA. And it's something that has led a few of them to leave school early, to leave their college wrestling careers behind, to forego a chance to make it into the Olympics because, hey, they can make money right now. So wondering if come 2023, some of these great wrestlers that have a chance to make the transition to mixed martial arts decide to stay with wrestling because, hey, they're not going to be hurting for money necessarily. So just thought that would be an interesting one to throw in. So that will conclude this edition of Unleashed. Now, we got to let the good folks know where they can find us and what we have coming up. So I'll start with our special guest, Nick Baldwin. Tell the good folks where they can find you on social media.
The good folks can find me at Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. They can check out my work at Bloody Elbow. Over the past week or so, it's pretty much all Bellator 228. That will, of course, change pretty soon because the card is over. But yeah, for all your Bellator 228 stuff, go check out my stuff. And after that, go check out Ant Walker's stuff.
Oh yeah, I like to throw the assist there. And Nick joined me on the weigh-in live stream, so we got to say a bunch of crazy stuff to one another, and that was fun. So Ben,
and look at dicks too,
Yes. Looking at penises was quite the duties for a journalistic perspective there. Ben,
I'm not surprised,
now.
Mr. Falcons.
So Ben, when you're not staring at penises, where can the good folks watching find you?
Well, even when I'm staring at penises, they can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy, or they can find me on the goodoldsherdog.com front page in the features drop-down menu. I'm in there. I'm at the very bottom, as befits my station. And I'm about to go on a truly epic tear of op-ed and historical feature production, so buckle up.
Oh, hells to the yes.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I quite honestly, when Ben and I just wrote op-eds for Sherdog, I would always get a little nervous when his was dropping because I was like, man, I'm about to get outshined. So I'm anticipating
the
this.
tingles going.
Yeah, like, ooh, this got me nervous. All right, Jay, please tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at jpetri. You can also find me on Sherdog. I'm in the features drop down. I'm in that list as well. And I do all sorts of things. I wear a variety of hats for Sherdog.com. I'm the official play-by-play writer. So if there's an event you want to learn about, I will tell you the story. I like telling stories, so I got plenty for you. I'll do the pre-fight and post-fight betting odds columns. I'll do the statistical analysis pieces called Fight Facts. And basically, I'm everywhere you want to be in the fight world. So see you there.
All right. And of course, I'm Ant Walker. You can find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. You're obviously watching the Walkout Network, so you already know to follow this page, subscribe, like share
subscribe.
it. Yep. Tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. So what I've got coming up, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, analyzing UFC 243. We'll be going live this weekend. I'll do a Walk of Shame broadcast right afterwards. So tune in, jump in the live chat, give me your thoughts, and we'll go ahead and talk all that good shit. So that will do things here for Unleashed. He's Jay Petrie. He's Ben Duffy. That other nice, handsome young man is Nick Baldwin. I'm Ant Walker. So you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to hide your penis at weigh-ins. And no matter what, you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace. And